Now, bear in mind, I watched both of these like over a week ago, so we'll see how well I can manage to discuss them.
I watched Bring a Baby a week ago. I was able to finally watch Only Angels Have Wings yesterday.
Mm.
So, and God, what did I fucking watch this? Because I couldn't do the meme fest, so there's not a meme movie I can talk about. Yeah, a Russian film. A pretty good Russian film, but we'll get to that.
Oh boy, oh, that'll be exciting. I have this long ass list that I'm still working through. There's
well, then maybe this is going to be dominated by you.
Well, we'll see. Okay, let's go. Welcome back to the Hack Fraud Show, everybody. We are back from our exile to talk about some Howard Hawks movies.
We have some generally mixed. I have some pretty mixed opinions about Howard Hawks. There's some films of his that I really, really enjoy. One of them we're going to talk about. Others of which just leave me cold. I think sometimes that Howard Hawks can fall into that sort of not so much bland, but sort of controlled and standard classic Hollywood mold.
Yeah, well, he was known, I think, as more of kind of, the consummate professional studio guy for hire kind of thing.
Yeah.
Rather than
he is a studio filmmaker through and through, unlike some of the other 1940s auteurs we talk about.
Yeah, but I think he was one of the best, and all of the movies. I mean, I also didn't super love one of the movies we watched this week, but the other one I thought was really spectacular. So he is a figure that really has come to fascinate me recently, because I hadn't seen any of his movies until I think I watched Rio Bravo for my Westerns class.
Yeah, I haven't seen Rio Bravo. There's a lot of Howard Hawks I haven't seen. I've seen The Big Sleep. I've seen His Girl Friday, and I think that's alongside with the ones I watched this week. Obviously, I think that's about it. So there's still quite an extensive filmography of him I still haven't got to.
Yeah, I've also seen His Girl Friday, but I haven't seen The Big Sleep. So we've got a decent mixture going here. And again, he's just one of those figures who kind of looms large in Hollywood history. He did a lot of different
particularly
movies.
Early Hollywood history.
Yeah. He's well known, I think, for his work with Cary Grant, especially. They collaborated a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to think what some of his other famous movies were.
Well, he also did the original Scarface.
Oh yeah, he did do the original Scarface,
which is one of those early sound classics.
Yeah. But today we are talking about one of his kind of most beloved comedy works, which was 1938's Bringing Up Baby, and then 1939's Only Angels Have Wings. And honestly, I think, I'm not sure we could have picked two better movies to really show his range as a director. I mean, these...
Yeah, this is going to fall right into our theories about him.
Yeah.
but that's all coming later.
Yes, it is. And so first,
what
of course, we're going to talk about what we've been watching. Who wants to start with this particular segment?
I have one movie. Reed, is it true that you have no movies? Tis okay, friend. Time is not always on our side.
Hey, you gave a lively talk about Gallivant in our Too Much Christ episode, and while I was editing that episode, my curiosity was piqued enough to go back and rewatch the opening number trailer that ABC had put out a few years ago.
Is the trailer still good?
It's still pretty fun. I like it. I found there's two alternate versions of it. The sing-along version has slightly different lyrics, which take the teeth out of it a little bit, which honestly I'm not super surprised by. I remember watching it and being surprised that they let them use the word nymphomania in an ABC primetime sitcom. I'm still not going to watch the show, though.
Yeah, neither am I, because that just fits into really none of my wheelhouses.
All right, well, John, what Russian film are you going to regale us with this week?
Okay, I watched a film called The Thief. Its real name in Russian, is Vor, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Directed by, and I'm looking right off the Wikipedia page, so this is all going to sound hackneyed, Pavel Shukarai. Again, I'm probably butchering that too, but This film, it kind of reminds me of the film. I remember I watched this last year for one of my like introductory film classes. It's called Europa, Europa.
Oh yeah.
Also called Hitler, You Solomon. And I remember like that was kind of like it had kind of like the sort of like film quality and some kind of like lighting look of a TV movie, but it was like shot really dynamically and had like a great like atmosphere and pace. And this kind of appears to be in that same boat. It looks like it only had a budget of like $2 million. It's like 96 minutes. It's like really stripped down. It's like lots of gray. That kind of like not very good film quality. It kind of looks like the sort of thing you'd see on TV, but it's very dynamic and it's paced very well. Mm-hmm. And like the filmmaker has a great sense of atmosphere, so it really kind of puts it all together as far as technicals are concerned. But the plot is kind of simple, and that's actually really nice for a movie like this. It concerns a mother named Katya and her son Sanya, who was born alone. She went into labor in the middle of a field that looks like an apocalypse in 1946, right after the war. The husband being someone who had died in World War II. Hmm. And this has like the like late Stalin period, like dressed all over it. Like people consistently praise Stalin in toast. Like his image is everywhere. One of the characters, the titular thief, a man named Tolyan, has a tattoo of Stalin on his chest, and he says to the boy Sanya, who is our point of view character, I'm Stalin's son, but you can't tell anyone. Which is one of those things. I got into an argument with my professor about what the kind of context that's being told in. Mm. But I read it as more playful. But the actual set of the movie takes place in like 1952. That's the meat of it, though there's also like other time jumps. But Katya meets this what appears to be a Russian soldier, this Tolyan, on a train, and she goes with him, and they don't ever get married, but they claim they're married to get into like these communal apartments all across like Russia. Mm. And during the first one, Katya finds out that Tolyan is a thief, and he just goes to places, like schmoozes everyone, steals everything, and goes. Along the way, like Sanya, the boy, has a very complex relationship with this figure. Like sometimes Tolyan is like a somewhat caring father figure, like the time like says like, oh, I'm the son of Stalin, but you can't tell anyone, and winking at him at dinner. And there's also like a time where like they go to a sauna, and he says like, don't worry about it, yours will grow in, because like everyone's like naked, and the boy is just sitting there flabbergasted. But there's also like other times where like he's genuinely terrified of Tolyan, because like he's a brute of a man who overpowers his mother Katya, who and like pretty much keeps them under his thumb to be a part of his like crazy schemes of going into communal apartments, stealing everything, and bailing. We also learn that it's possible that like he might not have ever been a soldier, and that was just like a lie they came up with. But of course, at like some point, like he gets captured and he goes to a prison. Which then the movie like cuts forward, and we see it cuts forward twice. I'm not going to tell you what happens in one because it's a pretty big spoiler, but it kind of cuts forward, and like in one of them, he like the boy confronts Tolyan like years afterward, after his mother has died from a botched abortion, as like an orphan. And like we just see like there's so much emotion on their face. Like the kid actors they get for this movie are incredible. They have like these excellent like actors' eyes that you can just see everything in. Mm. And then and then it cuts like way into the future during like what we assume is like the Chechen War. It's pretty vague with dates and like placing, which I kind of like about it. We cut like to him as like a soldier like way in the future. We sort of hear him like resonating about like what this meant to him in his formative years. And it's a really interesting movie about fathers and sons, particularly a very broken relationship between a father and son. And it's kind of like a strange, abusive surrogate family, especially because like the actual father is long gone and dead, far before he was even born. And it's also just like a great like depiction of the Stalinist period and like the iron grip and just fear of the Stalinist period. So I really enjoy it. I don't want to say too much about it because I do really want it. It is really quaint. It's really quick. It's really stripped down. Mm-hmm. But I also think it's like really like well paced and really and wildly entertaining. So I think it's like I think it's one of the better of these like Russian films I've seen. It's not like the epic, like the gorgeous epic that Leviathan in, but I also kind of admire it for as like quaint as it is. So it also just has like the image that like I'll never forget of like the boy trying to make like a fence for his mother's grave out of like bed frames. And there's like, even though it's like they just clearly didn't have any money, like there's some great images in it. So I really like this movie. I would highly recommend it, especially like if the Stalinist period like it interests you, particularly the late Stalinist period, which there happened to be a movie made of in last year.
Oh yeah. Which I haven't seen
I'm
it
going to rush and see that as soon as I can.
I also need to see it. I'm hopefully going to see it this week, finally. That should be fun.
Yeah, Thief. I really enjoyed it. I think it's one of the better. I think it's honestly one of the better Stalin films out there, though. For many reasons, there aren't that many of those.
Yeah. I may have to check that out. It's interesting because Dr. Zhivago engages with the Stalin period like a little bit, but very briefly and only at the end. So that too kind of avoids that thorny area. Yeah,
Stalin is something that like he is the worst person you've never seen movies of.
Yeah. Well,
no, like there's also like that weird God, what was that? Wasn't there like that Robert Duvall like?
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Maybe I should try and see that. That would probably be a fascinating watch.
Oh, have you not seen it? It was.
I haven't seen it.
It was okay.
It was just okay.
I mean, I'm fascinated by Stalin, so like any depiction of him would interest me.
Yeah.
Particularly from like a strictly Anglophonic view.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it hits all the beats. I think you might kind of like it.
Okay.
But I'm sure there'll be plenty in it that you can be freshly infuriated by.
Oh, certainly. But that's also partially what I watch movies for.
Yeah.
Is to be able to have things to talk about them, even if those things aren't good.
True.
Tyler, it's time for your epic list.
Oh boy. Okay, let me see if I can get through all of this. Probably not, but I'll try. Let's see. I've watched a couple of French movies from the 30s. More and more I'm discovering I think I like French movies like from before the New Wave. Like, I would not describe myself as a big fan of French movies, but I think that's mostly because they tend to show us stuff from the New Wave and from afterwards, and I think the stuff before is a lot more interesting.
Yeah, well, especially like after, like once like the European Union became a more ingrained thing, like European film just became more pan-European. Like I think it must be noted that like Thief was a French and Russian production.
Okay, interesting.
And like so many of these things are just like these like pan-national productions. So like the idea of French film is kind of difficult to nail down in the European Union era.
Yeah, that is true. But
especially with the Kieslowski movies.
Yeah, the Kieslowski movies especially,
Yeah, but like stuff from kind of the 50s onward, I've been somewhat hit or miss with. But both these movies I thought were really incredible. The first one was Jean Renoir's The Rules of the Game, which I know you saw a while ago. God, that movie is superb. Just
I wasn't like quite as like enraptured by it as you probably were, but that is an excellent movie about aristocracy.
I just loved. I mean, I recognize that there's a lot of like satirical stuff going on in that movie. Some of which is harder to kind of parse if you're not familiar with that period, which I am not really. But
I claim to be, but probably am not.
But even with that removed, I think it still works brilliantly as like this great chamber piece comedy of manners with just characters going in and out of doors and faffing about, and that's all very, very fun. Until it's
right under the cloud of World War II coming as well.
Yes. The knowledge of that kind of hovers over the entire movie in a really compelling way.
Wait, these people would have been collaborators.
Yeah.
Which I think is actually an excellent thing.
It is a fascinating thing to build a movie around, and I liked it a lot. The other one was Jean Vigo's La La Land, which shows up a lot, very high on lists of the greatest movies ever. Do you know about this movie?
Jean, how do you spell the title?
La La Land is L'Atalante.
There we are. Adelon.
Yeah.
I've probably not heard of it.
Okay, well, Jean Vigo is a filmmaker who not a lot of people talk about. He died very young. This was his only feature film. It's set almost entirely on a barge, the titular La La Land. concerns this young couple who are newly married, and she has to kind of adjust to life on this barge with her new husband and the two crew members who are kind of assisting. I thought it was very, very good. It's got a lot of great moments of wonder. It's very dexterously shot. He shoots the boat in a lot of really interesting ways, and the character dynamics I thought were very compelling as well. It's a very sweet little movie. It's been restored many times because there was a lot of, futzing about with it in the ensuing decades. But I really enjoyed that movie as well. I think that it's a really compelling, I think considering these movies are, around about 80 years old, it is really interesting to see how well they continue to hold up. I think they use film grammar and film techniques that we are still using, and they probably pioneered a lot of them, and I think they are fascinating to watch, and also very
good
engaging.
Filmmaking is universal and non-temporal, so
yeah, certainly.
That's what I like. How else would I be able to enjoy the films of George Méliès? Like one of the earliest filmmakers of all time.
Yeah. So I would recommend checking out La La Land if you have the time. It is very short, so
that seems like something right up my alley.
Yeah, I think you would enjoy it. And then
I love the Michel Gondry poster that's on that's on Wikipedia. But regardless,
anyway,
down the list.
To continue this thread a little bit, I saw Orson Welles' The Magnificent Ambersons.
This is probably the one Orson Welles film that you've seen and I haven't.
Well, you've explained your rationale for not seeing it, which makes sense. The behind the scenes turmoil of this movie has been well documented. Let me just say,
let me put it this way: I am not boycotting The Magnificent Ambersons. I choose not to see it because I know what it is and what I'm going to get.
Well, the first half hour or so, almost exactly, honestly, is really fantastic. You can see a lot of Orson Welles' touches on it. I think that's probably the part of the movie that went mostly untouched. It begins with his wonderful narration. The magnificence of the Ambersons began in 1873. And kind of runs over the first 15 minutes of the movie or so. It's a great bit of setting up. There's some wondrous technical filmmaking in it with the camera moves and the lighting, the ceilings, the oneers. That's all very, very well done. And right around the half-hour mark, there's a scene where a bunch of the characters are out kind of riding in the snow. And that scene ends with them riding away as it irises out. And pretty much with that, you can see Orson Welles' vision of the movie riding away, never to be seen again. And
literally destroyed.
Literally, the very next scene, there's an immediate drop. You can tell, this is where they started bringing out the scissors. I can't claim that, I know exactly, what was shot by Welles and what was, kind of redone by Robert Wise and the studio.
That's who was Robert Wise.
Yeah, but Robert Wise edited it, and the way the movie is edited goes a long way toward destroying it. Honestly, after the first half hour, there is very little that is nearly as engaging as what has come before. And
it is one of the great. It is kind of the film tragedy. I don't think there's really anything else as regaled as what happened to the Magnificent Ambersons.
Yeah, and barring some miracle of discovery, we are never going to know what Orson Welles' preferred version would have looked like. And that is...
I don't think it can be found, because I'm pretty sure they just destroyed them.
Yeah, well, allegedly...
I think they just destroyed the prints.
Allegedly, they sent a print of the rough cut to him when he was in South America, but nobody knows what happened to it. So, but they did find Metropolis, so it's possible that could turn up at some point. Things happen all the time, but...
Metropolis was a miracle on top of another miracle.
Yeah, so. I'm not waiting with bated breath. So... Magnificent Ambersons, a lot of people still say even in its truncated form, it's still outstanding. The first half hour is really extraordinary, but honestly, outside of that, I was kind of meh on it.
Yeah, I'm worried to look at it because I know what's coming, and I know I'm going to get half like a Wells movie, of which something made by one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, and then Robert Wise trying to imitate Orson Welles.
Yeah, it's sad, but I am glad I saw it, and it's an interesting document of his career. Anyway, that's The Magnificent Ambersons. Let's see what else. I saw the Agnes Varda documentary from last year, Faces Places,
Ooh.
which was delightful. Oh, it's a wonderful little movie.
Yeah.
It concerns her and this French kind of street artist named JR, kind of forming an unlikely friendship. They go around France, meeting people, taking photographs, creating elaborate paste up artworks of people that they meet. It's kind of a movie about aging. Like Agnes Varda says in the movie, her dream is to kind of meet as many people as possible to kind of keep her memories alive. There's this thing that they have a running thing with her vision, because her vision is fading. It's just a wonderful little portrait of a friendship and of a woman kind of grappling with old age and with mortality. And there's a great segment toward the end where she takes him to meet Jean-Luc Godard, and I don't want to spoil anything, but this movie pretty much confirms your working theory that Jean-Luc Godard is a living troll, and that's interesting in a lot of ways. But
yeah, this seems delightful. I've only seen one Agnes Varda film, which was Les Glaneurs and Les Glaneuses, and that was Agnes Varda is just a delightful presence, the guide your movie.
Yeah,
and that's which is her going about looking at people who live off trash and so forth, and that's just a fascinating movie. I think Agnes Varda is by far my favorite figure of the French New Wave.
Yeah. I need to see her other movie. Did you not see? I thought you saw Cleo from 5 to 7.
I've seen Chloe from 5 to 7, and that's a really interesting movie. That's also a movie that's far better shot than most of the French New Wave films. It actually looks like a movie, but it's also got really interesting experiments of time that which is par for the course of the French New Wave.
Yeah,
so Cleo from 5 to 7 I would recommend as an actual movie, and not just a hey, this was important in the cinema history.
Yeah, I definitely want to watch that, and I want to see more of her movies. Her kind of running thing seems to have been playing with ideas of documentary versus fiction and time and whatnot. So that's all stuff I'm interested in. So I would definitely want to see more of her movies at some point.
Yeah, I like the Glaneurs and Les Glaneuses, so maybe you'd like that.
Okay, I'll look into that as well. Let's see, a couple more things. I wanted to talk about this TV show that I've been watching, actually. I just finished the second season, which is all that's aired up to this point, but I will be awaiting the third season with bated breath. This is NBC's The Good Place.
I've heard a lot about this. Well, not a lot, but it's one of those things that kind of been in the back of my mind, but I've never gone about to watch it.
Yeah,
I've been told it's good over and over again, and it makes me want to watch it less every time I hear it, to be honest.
Okay, well, you should definitely watch it. Honestly, this is proof that there is still a beating heart somewhere in network television. This show really is. It's hilarious. It's wildly inventive. It's got a great, diverse cast. Ted Danson and Kristen Bell are kind of the two, leads, but, all the supporting roles are kind of fleshed out with a lot of diverse, wonderful actors all around.
Ted Danson.
What?
Ted Danson.
I love Ted Danson, though. He is great in this show. Kristen Bell is very good, too. What are the real revelations? This actress named Jamila Jamil, who plays one of the main characters. She is very, very funny. And really the whole cast is spectacular. So I don't know if you know the premise. Basically, Kristen Bell dies and comes to The Good Place, run by Ted Danson as a kind of this spiritual afterlife figure. And the storytelling of it all is twisty and turny in a lot of wonderful ways. It is so funny. The joke construction is great. The character work is really, I thought, spectacular. It's such an inventive show, and I really love it. And again, I cannot wait for the third season now. And I would encourage both of you to check it out, especially Reed, because I know you have more patience for television than John does, but I think that you would both really enjoy it.
Yeah, it seems this seems interesting, and I think like your recommendation might be the final thing to like that pushes me towards actually watching it.
It's a lot of fun, and asks some really interesting questions about ethics and the afterlife and moral issues and lots of things. It is a surprisingly philosophical show at times, so I would heartily recommend it.
I like all these things.
Yeah. I guess one last thing, because I just watched this yesterday, I finally got around to watching the Brazilian film City of God.
Ooh, I have heard a lot about it, but I've not seen it.
You should watch it immediately. It is spectacular. I think, I talked a lot about, how extraordinary The Wire was. This movie is like a whole season of The Wire, like compressed into 2 hours, but like loses none of the thematic and kind of emotional subtlety of it. It takes place in Rio de Janeiro in one of the favelas, basically slums, called the City of God. Follows this one character named Rocket as he grows up kind of surrounded by crime and the local drug trade. But it is such a rich tapestry of that world and of that community. The style of it is really extraordinary. It kind of does like kind of the Goodfellas mode, but mixes that with kind of a verite sort of approach that works really well. There's a lot of incredible like storytelling in it. The acting is really, really great. The characters feel just so rich. It is really an extraordinary movie, and I cannot recommend it more, quite frankly.
Okay, yeah, because I've heard about it pretty much only in like one of those like big, like broad, like hit like film history textbooks that they once gave me.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, no, it's great, and my only regret is that I put off watching it for so long. And that about wraps it up for now, so I think it's about time to get into some Howard Hawks films here.
Oh, yeah. Where do we want to start? Because we're going to have two very different conversations.
Why don't we go chronologically? We can start with Bringing Up Baby.
So, Bringing Up Baby. I sort of like alluded to on the last episode of the podcast that I really did not like this this movie.
Yeah.
And I think I've come up with an adequate explanation as to why. But Tyler, why don't you introduce it?
Okay, so the movie concerns Cary Grant as I have forgotten what his character's name is in this movie. I should always have the Wikipedia pages pulled up.
David Huxley.
Yes, Huxley, Dr. Huxley. So he needs one last piece for this dinosaur skeleton that he's building. Yeah. He needs to woo a wealthy donor for his museum, and also
on a golfing trip.
Yes, and also he's getting married tomorrow, I think, when the movie starts.
Yeah, to a very like cold woman, it seems.
A very cold woman who it is pretty much established right away that this woman like has no interest in sex at all. She's like, you must focus on your work.
And it pretty much says to in a public place surrounded by people, what do you mean? We won't be having children. As if they have like never talked about this before in the entire like run up of their relationship.
Yeah, somehow. Anyway, Cary Grant quickly falls in with this heiress played by Katharine Hepburn. Her name is Susan Vance. And they're just wild antics ensue as they move from episode to episode. There are at least like 6 different movies sandwiched into this movie.
Yeah, at one point, like, the titular... It's so strange, as you think it's going to be like a 3 Men and a Baby story, just given the title, but no, it's a leopard.
Right, Baby is a leopard that Katharine Hepburn's brother has sent back from Africa, I think, and...
I think, like, we only see, like, the brother in, like, little, like, letters.
Right, so they bring in this leopard. There's another leopard that comes in at some point. This is just like...
Isn't there like a circus in town?
Yes, there's a circus in town with a raving mad leopard that they're taking to be put down. and this leopard, I believe, is let out by Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn as they're searching for their own escaped leopard. It's a whole thing. This is like one of the most kind of madcap screwball comedy setups ever, and I enjoyed it way less than I thought I was going to.
Yeah, I'm just gonna like to give like my like big problem with the movie. Like, the Katharine Hepburn character is a sociopath, and the movie thinks that's funny.
Kinda, yeah.
And I think that is just like the central like plot of this movie is Cary Grant trying to get this fucking dinosaur bone and getting tortured by Katharine Hepburn along the way into being chased by a wild leopard. And if anything gets framed as, doesn't like Cary Grant need to lighten up?
Yeah, well, see, that's kind of the weird thing about it, is that if it had, like, clarity around her character, I think that would be fine.
There's like the idea of like a movie that like this like chance encounter leads to crazier things, and they have to like to keep lying about identities and so forth. There's the potential for like a very like raucous, quick-paced, really compelling comedy, but the movie never moves beyond like that central, like, not so much hypocrisy, but that sort of like central non-clarity.
Right. Well, because Katharine Hepburn like sucks him into this, and he just kind of keeps going along with it because you get the feeling he may be, you know, enjoying it in spite of himself, which is made sort of explicit toward the film's end. Although he also kind of doesn't seem to be enjoying himself.
I know he seems like he's thoroughly not enjoying himself for most of the movie. It just seems like he's doing this because like he's just some like gentlemanly figure who like doesn't wish to see like this woman get screwed over.
Well,
for whatever reason.
Cary Grant plays like the flustered, put upon gentleman, like with the best of them, but. You know, when you still have to sandwich in a love story into this because it's a classical Hollywood movie and that's all we know how to do, you kind of have to... It does tend to take the movie off the rails a little bit.
The love story just kind of just doesn't work. It's just not very believable because, like, we're pretty much just torturing Cary Grant this, like, entire time, and, like, when love comes in, you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
We're supposed to do this? Is this a joke? Oh, no, it's not a joke. It's a classic Hollywood movie.
Well, I do think that the torturing Cary Grant is fun in spurts, I think. Like, my favorite movie within this movie is the part where the big game hunter comes over for dinner, and Katharine Hepburn's aunt is there, and they have that whole dinner table scene, and they're just all... Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant are just dashing around like madmen trying to figure out what's going on.
And he's trying to do calls with himself, and like an actual leopard calls that. The thing about it was, I think maybe if like the Cary Grant character was a bit more smarmy, and like a bit less of like a goody-goody, then like there'd be a sense of like there's some kind of payoff to him being tortured, and then there'd be an actual arc.
Right.
Because like the way it is, like Cary Grant really doesn't change in the movie.
Yeah.
He's kind of like the same, like, oh boy, I'm like strung into this insane situation because I really fucking want this bone. And there's also like the infuriating thing of like Katharine Hepburn just like doesn't understand that this man has a life.
Well, it's so strange.
Something to him.
You would think that, like, you know, Cary Grant is a big star. You would think that they would try to make him like an on-par, like, sparring partner with Katharine Hepburn, but that doesn't really happen.
He doesn't have as much to do as you might think. He's kind of like he's a reactionary character in like in a very explicit way. Like everything he does is spurned by the actions of others. Like very little of what he does is by his own intuition, which is fine to an extent.
Yeah, I mean you can structure a movie around that kind of a protagonist. Like After Hours is kind of done that way, and that movie works like gangbusters. But, like,
After Hours also has like the crucial scene of him like breaking down and saying like, "What the fuck is going on tonight?" And that scene is just nowhere to be found in this.
Right, and also in that movie, I think, you know, he does take steps to at least try to like mitigate what is happening to him.
Yeah,
And
and it's also the case that like he's not the most likable character. So like there's like kind of like
mhm,
classic like Schadenfreude we like get from that because
mhm,
in essence like comedies are kind of like us obtaining pleasure from people's pain.
right.
But like if we watch that pain and it just isn't funny and like instead we empathize with them,
Yeah.
it just doesn't work. And I think that's like what's happening to me as I watch this movie is that like I empathize with Cary Grant, and to see him just like constantly get shit on by like a sociopath is just not funny to me.
Well, I mean, I do agree with you up to a point. I do
Yeah.
think that some comedy, I mean, with like the Charlie Brown stuff, like you empathize with Charlie Brown, and he
Mm-hmm.
is just kind of relentlessly shit on. And I'm trying to think like why that works and why this doesn't for me. Which I
Yeah, well, I think you're probably far more in depth with this, but like my basic response is that like the Charlie Brown like Peanuts stories are like constantly imbued with like the philosophy of this kind of character, and that
mhm.
sort of a classic sort of like childhood innocence yet also melancholy. Though also like the Peanuts comics are just kind of like these amalgams all their own, and like
Yeah.
I think Charles Schultz is kind of like you can't. It's kind of like lightning in a bottle
Yeah,
per
well,
se.
this may not be the greatest comparison, but I mean,
Yeah, no, I understand where you're coming from.
I also think that like the overall tone of Peanuts is much more like melancholic and kind of
Mhm.
at times just depressing than this movie
Yeah,
is, and
yeah. This is
and
just complete like Hollywood screwball.
right.
Here we go.
And Peanuts also doesn't end with like Charlie Brown and Lucy getting married, so
No, no.
that is also kind of a mitigating factor. So I don't know. I do think there are merits to this movie. Like you've got that great kind of sparkling Howard Hawksian dialogue, which I think works pretty well for the most part. There are good scenes here. Like I said, that dinner table scene is something I've never forgotten.
Yeah, the dinner table stuff. That's like that. I think like the best like creation out of this is that big game hunter who's both like very intelligent yet also just kind of oblivious.
Yeah. Other scenes just kind of go on too long. Like that prison scene at the end, I was just kind of like, "Oh my god, what
Yeah,
how much longer can this go
this
on?"
movie has like the bad habit of like taking a single joke and just dragging it out.
Mm.
Like even with like the leopard stuff, like you get the feeling that like God, this is just all like variations on one joke.
That whole like mistaken identity thing, I mean it does wear a little bit thin as the movie keeps going. And yeah, I don't know. I think one thing Howard Hawks said, because this movie like was not very well received when it came out. It only
No,
was kind of,
it was a flop too.
yeah, it was a flop, and it only kind of built up its reputation later. Howard Hawks kind of commented that like the mistake he made was that everyone in this movie was kind of a screwball figure. He like didn't really have anyone who was kind of a straight man, which is a good point. Like they try to make Cary Grant a straight man, but he is such like a hapless figure that you end up
Yeah,
just kind of not really buying that.
and also like to compare this like to His Girl Friday, because His Girl Friday
Mhm.
is like kind of in the same vein as this. They're different in very crucial areas, but like
Yeah,
His Girl Friday has stakes.
right.
His Girl Friday has moments where characters just like stop and like there's like that brilliant moment like in like the writing room that's just like man, what happened to us?
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And I think like just like those quiet character moments are essential in a work like this. I think, yeah, I think you're getting. I'm trying to come as like the characters in this are just so transparently like archetypes as well.
Yeah. Well, you make a good point. When you come into His Girl Friday, there's such a sense of like you say stakes, and like
Yeah.
there's a relationship already built because like these two characters used to be married. So there's this great
There's also something called chemistry.
yeah.
Which like Cary Grant in his like bumbling form just like isn't allowed to develop, even though Cary Grant is like a wildly charming person who could easily pull that off.
Right. Yeah. And with this movie, yeah, you don't really buy the character dynamic, at least as far as it like turning into a romantic thing. And I guess maybe you can only really like look at this movie as like kind of a series of comedic set pieces in some ways, and
It's kind of like a series of skits with the same characters.
yeah,
And that's not necessarily a pejorative.
Right.
I think the problem is, like, the characters just aren't strong enough.
Yeah, I think if you're going to hang, like, an entire movie, like, on these characters and, you know, putting them through, like, various absurd situations is fine, but they should be, like, characters that make sense to have in these situations, and unless you're just going to go, like, full absurd and make it like a Monty Python kind of thing, you have to ground it in some sort of character dynamics that make sense, and these ones kind of don't.
Because, like, I'm thinking of, like, all, like, this, like, the classic Hollywood, like, screwball comedies we've watched, like the Ernest Lubitsch stuff, and fucking Duck Soup kind of falls into this in its own way.
Yeah.
But like, these are films that have, like, real identifiable characters. Like Duck Soup, for, like, as absurd as it is, like, those characters are distinct, and, like, they do have not so much arcs, but there are stakes there technically.
Well, and again, like, all those movies have, like, a defined straight man. Like, as goofy as Groucho Marx can be, he's always, like, reacting to the situation he's in with this kind of bemused skepticism that, like, grounds it in a substantial way.
Oddly, Duck Soup is a more believable world than Bringing Up Baby, and I never thought I could say that.
You're kind of right about that.
Do we have anything else to say, or?
Not really. I mean, I didn't hate this movie, but, like, yeah, something about it was just off, and I think you've done, like, a pretty good job of kind of identifying, like, why that was.
And you've also, like, helped me, like, sort of, like, figure out, like, kind of, like, what exactly makes it, like, because I don't hate this movie either. I'm not angry at it, but it's also something, like, I can't quite say it's like, oh, it's okay either. Like, there's something, I think there's, like, something deeply, not troubling, but sort of, like, deeply, like, wrong feeling about watching it for me.
Yeah, and, like, the other part of it is that, like, if Katharine Hepburn were, like, a fun, like, sociopath to be around, that would be fine. But I just kind of got tired of her after a while.
Oddly enough, she's too straight. They're playing it too straight. Maybe it needs to be just a little bit goofier. Maybe it just needs to be, like, a little bit more fun to it, because Katharine Hepburn, it's not that different a performance from His Girl Friday, but you just don't have the depth and, like, the character work that's been built into, like, that character from His Girl Friday.
And also the dynamic is just so different. Like, Rosalind Russell isn't constantly abusing Cary Grant in His Girl Friday.
We're coming to, like, His Girl Friday is a comedy masterpiece, and this just isn't.
Yeah, no. So I was, you know, I think it's safe to say we were both underwhelmed. Reed, from your silence, I'm assuming you didn't watch this movie.
You would be very much correct, and I'm curious to think how you deal with something that's very much played not as a comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, well, Only Angels Have Wings is a masterpiece, and we'll get to that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think if we have nothing else to say about Bringing Up Baby, we might as well just segue right into it.
I will say, like, thank you for, like, helping me, like, flesh out my ideas, because I was kind of curious, like, how am I really going to sell this?
Yeah, no, conversation always helps. But, Only Angels Have Wings, on the complete other end of the spectrum, is one of the goddamn best movies ever made.
This movie is... There is a real, like, depth and maturity to this movie that, like, often, like, classic Hollywood films are just not allowed to have. Even, like, some of the most delightful ones, there's kind of, like, a built-in immaturity, kind of built-in naivete. Mm-hmm. So it can be as broad as possible. But in this, like, people are constantly talking and thinking about morality and danger and, like, relationships and past, and it's just wildly compelling.
Yeah. No, I think, like, this is right up there with Casablanca as, like, one of the best, like, assembly line studio product movies ever crafted, really. Like, I was shocked at, like, the depth of the characters, of the writing, and
of the atmosphere.
The atmosphere is superb, and, like, this movie, like, is technically a marvel as well. Like, the flying scenes are super well done.
There's some pretty damn good model work in this.
There really is. So just to introduce this a bit, so this movie takes place in somewhere in Central or South America.
It's a place, it's called Barranca, and I don't know where, like, in South America it's supposed to be.
Yeah, but Cary Grant, again, runs this like air mail delivery service that
and, like winky dink, like fly by the seat of your pants kind of arrangement.
Right. They fly in very dangerous conditions because, as you find out a little ways through the movie, there's been this kind of financial situation that has forced them to make an elaborate deal they have to deliver the mail every time within a certain window, or they'll just go bankrupt pretty much.
They'll lose their contracts, as like they say. A lot of the money stuff is kind of like vague, and that's good.
Yeah. Anyway, Jean Arthur kind of wanders into this as kind of this interloper who arrives on a boat and is just so both fascinated and horrified by like what she finds here that she can't help but stick around.
Yeah, there's sort of like her kind of arc is kind of like trying to dig into like what is it that I admire about this world, despite like my clear objections to it, and I think it's partly like she kind of finds a romance in it near the end.
Kind of, yeah.
And it's also kind of left like intentionally vague, which is always we can actually, it's a Hollywood movie that you can actually like read things onto it instead of like being like spoon fed ideas.
Exactly. Just there's so many great character dynamics in this. You have the relationship between Cary Grant and the kid, who is just such a compelling character. He's played by Thomas Mitchell, who played Uncle Billy in It's a Wonderful Life, of all things. That character is so great. That scene where like you find out that he can't fly anymore because his vision is going.
Yeah, that's
so poignant and so well done. His dynamic with the other character who comes in, who is responsible for his brother's death, I believe.
Yeah. It's like the actor's name is Richard Bartholomew.
Yeah. That character. Yeah, Bat McPherson. That's
a fascinating performance. That's an excellent character.
Excellent character.
And the wife he brings along, who is saying what did he do? Who just doesn't know like what he did, and then she's like always asking for answers. But like Cary Grant, like stone face, says like, I'm not going to tell you. You gotta ask him.
And like she also has romantic history with Cary Grant.
Yes.
What? This movie is insane, and God, I love it. I love it so much.
This is by far my favorite Cary Grant like performance and character so far. Like this character is just so fascinating, and just they're both like so straight laced, but also like understands like the emotional depth that's going on here. Like it is so easy to make a sort of like quasi villain character out of this, but like partially due to performance and partially just due to like the actually great nuanced writing. There is a real humanity here that is like really fascinating to dive into. Yeah. And Howard Hawks does a great job of like framing it all, and the screenplay does a great job of this too, of framing it all so that you completely kind of understand where each character is coming from. You see each of their viewpoints. You like understand who they are. You understand why they do what they do. It's just such an incredible like depth of writing and character development that is rare to see in movies now, let alone classical Hollywood films. Even like the fucking barman.
Yeah,
is like is some kind of they call him like just like the little things like calling him Baldy. And like there's like little touches like that are everywhere, and it just makes this like place just seem like such like a close knit community, and it feels just like so lived in. And also like, God, the cinematography is really good.
It's really good. Like it's almost noir-like sometimes, like the scene.
It's this kind of place that has like all these like slatted windows, so there's constantly lights coming in, but there's always like slits through it, so it's sometimes difficult to see people, and it's really dynamic.
Yeah, it's super
there's
dynamic.
Also the rain and the fog, also.
Oh, God, the rain.
Yeah, no, this movie's got a great sense of like atmosphere and atmospherics to it. I love that scene toward the beginning where Cary Grant's kind of coaching the pilot like through the plane, and the pilot ultimately dies, and just the way they ramp up the tension, like without you even seeing the plane really. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time because they just hold that shot, and they've built up the stakes so that you understand them, and you're just watching Cary Grant like kind of coach this guy through it, and that is one of the tensest scenes I've ever seen in a movie.
Well, like in the ending, where you generally go like for the first time, like in a like classic like Hollywood mold, we go, are they going to make it?
Yeah.
What is actually going to happen here? I was asking myself, like, where is this taking me? Right. I'm not exactly sure all the time.
Yeah, no.
That's magnificent.
It twists and turns in so many great ways. It's just an immaculately crafted movie. And Reed, what did you think of this film?
Jesus, let me pull up the calendar. Okay. Let's see. I saw this movie like
1 week ago.
like 2 weeks ago. Long time ago. But yeah, from what I remember, this was definitely a very mature, coded Hollywood movie, especially in Jeff's character as well. There's like a sort of toughness with him, but there's also a sense of that he knows limits as well.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps, and
like there was a nuance to that character that like a lot of these like classic Hollywood films just aren't allowed to have, because so much of it has to be like structured in these like black and white molds.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
I think it's also mostly like not a lot of this movie has music.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't really think about that.
There's a lot of scenes in this where like you like any other movie would like have like this overwhelming score, but like they just let it like hang without music. Like I think like it's especially clear. I think like the scene where McPherson and the kid are flying and they try to make it through like that pass.
Right.
I don't think there's music.
I think you're right about that. Like that scene and the scene where kid dies also is just not scored at all.
And like it's still just so tense and just so like and just dripping with atmosphere. Yeah.
I'm really quite shocked that like not more people talk about this movie. Honestly, like
I think if any, I think I like this a bit more than Casablanca.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen Casablanca, but like Casablanca is always one that like people bring up as just being like the supreme like example of classic Hollywood craft. And
I think like Casablanca fits a bit more neatly in the classic Hollywood mold. I think this has a little, not so much like there's certainly like a great deal of maturity that goes into Casablanca, but this I think this is just like dripping with like a true originality that like Casablanca just like by its own design just doesn't have.
Yeah, this movie, it's really like unlike any other movie I've seen. Like the setup is so unique and so kind of bizarre.
I love the setting.
The setting is incredible. Just everything like kind of aligns in this movie in a beautiful way.
Yeah.
And it's so rare to see that in any movie. And just the fact that like this is not something that's really brought up a whole lot is kind of appalling to me.
Well, there's a lot of like Citizen Kane film that's just kind of swept under the rug because like as much as I love Citizen Kane, like we do kind of praise it as like the be all end all of like Hollywood filmmaking.
Yeah,
and that's not always the case. As is, this.
I just think this movie is really, really spectacular, and if you haven't seen it, go out and see it immediately because it's a great example of like, what Howard Hawks could do as a director. Like, I think this is a real testament to his skills. He just kind of unites all these elements in a super compelling and super suspenseful way.
It's his masterpiece. This is like his passion project, I guess, because like apparently it was based off of like real like events that had happened with like the other films he did with flying.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
So like there's sort of like a passion project, but you just never get the feeling that like this is like just something that was handed to him. Like sometimes Hawks, you just get the feeling that he was like handed something, and he crafts like technician as he was, he would go through it as best as he can, but the passion just isn't there.
Yeah, you can really feel the passion with this, and I would say this is like right up there with Rio Bravo as the best of his works. I think Rio Bravo is excellent too, but this is really on another level. And
I'll have to see Rio Bravo at certain point, but this was quite a pleasant surprise. I'm really glad this was brought to me.
Yeah, no, you dig through all this stuff, and you can often find stuff that will really surprise you, and I'm very glad that this was put in front of me.
If anything, maybe I guess like a contemporary filmmaker we can compare him to was like Steven Soderbergh.
You're kind of right. I mean, he
somebody who did like everything
mm-hmm.
and like nothing at the same time, and also just like he's a name that can like kind of fall under the cracks because like the giant like titans of like early like classic cinema, like Hitchcock or Wells, like just loom so large.
Yeah. I think he is absolutely someone kind of worth going back and discovering. Like even if we don't love all his movies, like he had some masterpieces in there, and he is like a consummate craftsman.
When Hollywood movies are firing on all cylinders, that can be really something to see.
Yeah, it can
and like
be.
Also just like I love classic Hollywood acting at its best.
Yeah, I do too.
Like classic Hollywood acting like allows like such like an expressiveness and such a bigness of character that like you like things such as like calling someone baldy becomes a character building moment, and like it can't like the modern blockbuster can't help but kind of become like a technical dominated realm because so much of it is like the spectacle and the effects and like the sheer like scale of it all, and like it to the point where like sometimes like when you show like a character in profile with that, it almost looks silly.
Yeah.
Hollywood movies like this just aren't made anymore because they really can't be made anymore.
Yeah. This movie technically is great too, but he just, found a way, focusing on the characters and the story and just kind of weaving the technical wizardry into the story as it's required, like not putting, not building the story around that. That is, I think, really the key to that sort of thing.
Yeah, like you get like this world like feels like so lived in, just partially by effect. Like things as simple as like the water splashing on the airplane are really effective and really not just really great atmosphere and world building techniques. So I think we can go on forever.
We really could with this movie. God, go see Only Angels Have Wings just as soon as you possibly can.
If you have any interest in like classic cinema, then this would be right up your alley.
Yeah. And
Reed, do you have any like finishing thoughts on it, or are you quite as sold on it as we are? Because you're kind of quiet.
I don't know. I don't think I was as sold on this as you guys.
Oh, interesting.
Do you think you can articulate quite kind of why that is, or?
I think it was mainly the cinematography. Mainly,
it kind of for all like the lighting we're talking about, it does kind of look like a classic Hollywood movie. There's not that many like big close-ups. Like most of it is shot in a medium wide, which I think is really effective. But like that is kind of like the kind of default shooting style that it works. And I think like what does pull it out is like excellent lighting and staging.
Yeah. And I think that there was also some times as well when like it was a bit hard to see.
Interesting. I didn't have that. I didn't really have that issue. But where in the film did that come up for you?
It had to be in the bar scenes where like you had like many elements that were like staged. I think it was like towards the beginning, and then that just kind of didn't do it for me. I don't know.
The staging of those scenes is a little busy. I will acknowledge that.
Yeah.
I think it's cluttered, but there's also it's also cleverly staged. Like there's always a sense of like where our focus is.
Yeah.
Like you can always pick out like who am I supposed to pay attention to, which is like what like separates like the great craftsmen from like the not great craftsmen.
Right.
Yeah. There was also the whole like beginning sequence that kind of felt a little raw. So you have what's her name? Fuck.
What is it like the main like
Bonnie Lee?
Bonnie Lee.
So you have Bonnie Lee come in, and then she comes upon this world, and then she two employees, and then has a bit of like a rough start with Jeff, and then you have sort of this like raw like chafing moment when like one of those two people die in a plane crash. I mean, I thought that was compelling, but sort of looking back, I felt like that was tangential to Jeff and all the relationship dynamics that would take place after.
I think it's pretty like melodramatic. Like this film is like not without its melodrama, certainly.
Yeah.
But like I also think that like that kind of like initial relationship sets up like really great and compelling scenes later, and helps to both develop like Bonnie and Jeff. So I'd argue it I'd argue like it kind of feels like somewhat like Hollywoody at the beginning, but what it sets up is like truly, I think, is really special. Like especially, I adore the scene where like the two stakes come out and Cary Grant just starts chomping down because he sees nothing wrong with it, and like Bonnie Lee's just saying, what the fuck is wrong with you people? And like that's a great scene, and like I will like take all the melodrama it takes to get to that.
Yeah. Well, also to defend Jeff, it's South America. It's exciting. So there's that. That's sort of by definition. But I guess one more thing that I had a little bit problem with was like the guy in the lookout. He must get really lonely, but we don't get a lot about that.
He's got his goat. He's got his goat with him.
Oh my god, he's a goat fucker.
That would be a whole like great movie unto itself, like the life and times of the lookout up in the mountains, watching the planes go by.
Lookout ennui.
I would watch that.
Oh yeah, well, I think that's just another testament. Like even like characters as minor as that like seem so like fleshed out and full.
Yeah.
Is that all, Reed? Or
I think that's
okay. Well,
okay, then. So,
you make some valid
Howard
points.
Hawks, yeah. This is still like a Hollywood movie, and it still like does the things that like classic Hollywood movies do.
Yeah.
But like I would argue like there's just like a technical craftsmanship and just a sheer like emotional weight to it that really does set it apart.
Yeah, I would agree.
Howard Hawks week is done.
Yep, that is it.
What comes next?
Well, I think this is the week when we're watching Do the Right Thing in my class. So if we want to do that episode that we talked about.
Wait, what episode did we...
I think we talked about pairing Do the Right Thing with Ryan Coogler's first movie, Fruitvale Station.
I would be all for this. Not seeing Do the Right Thing is just kind of like a gaping hole in my filmography, especially as someone who's like fascinated with like the African American experience on film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no.
So like that's just like something. That's my embarrassment, and I am really excited to finally fulfill that. I'm
very, very excited to see that movie again. So this will be a good thing on all sides, I believe.
Didn't Spike Lee go to NYU and Ryan Coogler's a USC grad?
I believe that is correct.
Okay, so we can kind of see like an East Coast West Coast thing happening here.
Yeah, that'll be interesting actually. Yeah, Spike Lee very much comes from that kind of tradition of like the New York independent filmmaker, and
he is a New York filmmaker through and through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ryan Coogler, I think, kind of much more went through kind of the studio process.
He made Black Panther. So
yeah. Well, his first movie was Fruitvale Station. His second movie was Creed, and then his third movie was Black Panther. So this is a man who knows what he wants to do with his career.
Yeah, there's something to be said about like how like, that sort of like East Coast West Coast mentality, and also like I think there's also something to be said like what makes Spike Lee an independent director and what makes Ryan Coogler more like studio ready per se. Fruitvale Station was independentized too.
Yeah, it was pretty independent. I mean, it was a smaller movie shot on 16 millimeter. So we'll see with that. That'll be an interesting thing to look at.
Yeah, because I hope I just don't want to make this the like African American week.
Right. Yeah, no. No, these are like two movies from two very important African American filmmakers who come from slightly different periods. And I'm very excited to watch both of them. Yeah, and I'm excited to talk about it. Yep. All right, so I'll like watch more meme movies next week for us to laugh about. Yeah. That'll be good.
How close are we to 100?
This episode that we're recording right now is going to be 97. So we have 2 more after this one, and then the 100th. Ooh. And boy, do we have something cooking for you guys. I don't want to spoil it, but hearts will be broken in a lot of ways. This is Reed. You set up a pretty good system, I have to say. Yeah.
Let heads roll and roll and roll and roll.
We'll also get the shit on Inception again, which I'm always good for.
All right. So Anyway, be on the lookout for that. And next week, Do the Right Thing and Fruitvale Station. Thank you all for joining us once more, and we will see you next time. Boy, we're off to a great start here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.